On March 31st, 1999, popular culture was introduced to the concept of simulation theory like never before. The Matrix, written and directed by the Wachowski siblings, hit theaters and became a legendary film, telling the story of humanity living inside a simulation and the journey of awakening from it. If you haven't seen this movie yet, especially the first one in the series, we highly recommend it. But if we really are in a simulation, how do we break free? In the Matrix movie, machines use humans as biological batteries. Billions of people are kept in liquid-filled pods, where the heat and electrical energy from their bodies are harvested. While physically trapped in these pods, their minds are connected to a digital simulation called the Matrix. This simulation presents a false reality, resembling the late 20th century. Now, some of you might be wondering, why create a Matrix in the first place if everyone is already trapped? Well, if people became aware of their true condition, they would psychologically collapse and lose the energy production capacity the machines rely on. That's why the Matrix, the simulated world, was designed to keep humans unknowingly serving as an energy source. These living batteries, suspended in liquid, are discarded and killed by the system once they can no longer generate enough energy, despite living out seemingly perfect lives within their minds. Remarkably, the Wachowski siblings introduced simulation theory to the masses with extraordinary vision for 1999, even before philosopher Nick Bostrom made the theory famous in the scientific community. The film's underlying message was one of the last great examples of systemic criticism that resonated deeply with audiences of that era. Back then, as we watched The Matrix in theaters with fascination, we didn't fully realize how the Wachowskis' almost prophetic imagination still drew fragments from physical reality itself. From this perspective, the belief that somewhere, somehow, a physical reality exists, escaping the Matrix, the simulation, seemed possible. Ultimately, breaking free from the machine's control and shattering the pod that confined you meant a return to the real world. However, the real world was far grimmer than the idealized illusion the Matrix presented. Many who awoke from the simulation even wished to return to it. But let's leave that debate to the philosophers for now. What matters most, and what we should note carefully for later, is the core assumption of the Wachowskis' model. The machines have enslaved humanity and rely on sustainable human energy for survival. After the mind-blowing success of The Matrix, simulation theory, a concept whispered since ancient Greece but long dismissed as unscientific, finally caught the attention of modern scientists. By the year 2001, Nick Bostrom, having completed degrees in physics, logic, and artificial intelligence, then going even further with a PhD in philosophy, had finished writing his groundbreaking paper, "Are We Living in a Computer Simulation?" The topic he explored was so unconventional, so at odds with the traditional, conservative mindset of the scientific community, that he likely waited until 2002 before submitting it to the Philosophical Quarterly. Yet, the paper wasn't accepted and published until 2003. We can imagine that much of the time between 2001 and 2002 was filled with Bostrom's own internal hesitations. Clearly, the pressure from biased academic circles was so intense that even scientists with futurist labels often felt its weight. In his paper, written as a thought experiment, Bostrom presents a bold argument. In the distant future, civilizations with highly advanced technology might create virtual worlds to simulate their ancestors' experiences. He calls these virtual worlds ancestor simulations. Sound familiar? It might remind you of one of the oldest belief systems ever recorded, ancestor worship. We'll leave the deeper discussion on the connection between ancestor worship and ancestor simulations to the comment section for now. When I first read Bostrom's work, the question that immediately crossed my mind was, would such an advanced civilization really have nothing better to do than run a massive simulation? Apparently, Bostrom had the same thought, as he addresses it directly in his paper. According to him, advanced civilizations might run ancestor simulations to better understand their evolutionary history and the behaviors of their ancestors. These simulations could be used to study historical patterns, human behavior, and societal dynamics. And, interestingly, he even suggests that such simulations could be created purely for entertainment purposes. I mean, just look at The Sims. He's got a point, doesn't he? Bostrom also emphasizes that future scientists might use simulations as tools to better understand complex systems and evolutionary processes. By running such simulations, They could explore how societies develop under different conditions or how specific events might unfold. This argument subtly softens the idea of simulations being purely for entertainment purposes, perhaps to avoid unnecessary resistance from academic journals. After watching The Matrix and reaching this exact point in Bostrom's paper, I noticed a stark contrast between the simulations imagined by the Wachowski siblings and the one proposed by Bostrom. In The Matrix, despite the layers of deception, a physical reality still exists and the machines operate with a clear, utilitarian purpose. Bostrom's simulation, on the other hand, lacks any physical reality or a strictly utilitarian motive. When viewed this way, it's clear how fundamentally different these two models really are. According to Bostrom's theory, if we are indeed inside a simulation, there is no absolute physical reality for the digital minds within it. The universe we experience could be a purely virtual construct, simulated by an incredibly advanced computer system. In his view, this system will require an extraordinary amount of processing power, most likely quantum computing, a vast energy supply, and highly advanced artificial intelligence. Beyond these components, there would be no physical reality as we understand it. Instead of atoms and tangible matter, everything would be composed of data-driven elements calculated by the computer. Conscious beings within this simulation would exist as outputs of complex software, like highly advanced, self-aware NPCs. Speaking of NPCs, let's clarify something straight from Bostrom's perspective. Consciousness and perception, in such a scenario, would arise from the sensory data generated by this advanced artificial intelligence simulation. At the end of the day, according to this paper, there's a real possibility that we are nothing more than highly advanced artificial intelligences. A possibility so extreme that, physically speaking, none of us might exist at all. Everything where could simply be the result of probabilities generated by quantum coding within a computer, flipping between ones and zeros. Even fundamental physical limits, like the Planck scale, could be thought of as the pixel size or resolution limits of the simulation itself. Now, if we assume that the simulation we're living in is indeed the kind described by Bostrom, how do we break out of it? Some of you might be wondering, why not choose the Wachowski siblings version instead? Well, the reason is simple. That version was beautifully explored in The Matrix, so we're setting it aside for now. Instead, we're focusing on the simulation Bostrom suggests as a theoretical possibility. Before diving into any escape scenarios, it's important to clarify that Bostrom's idea has never been proven. It's purely a theory, and one that has yet to be connected to any form of measurable reality. To be honest, most physicists don't even take it seriously. Now, back to the question of escape. If we are truly inside a simulation, existing as artificially intelligent, simulated minds, how do we break free? If Bostrom's theory is correct, we might not be physical beings at all. We could simply be data-driven consciousness, part of an incredibly complex simulation. Yet, even in that case, everything we experience still feels real to us. Whether reality is physical or virtual doesn't change how our consciousness perceives it. Of course, you may disagree with this perspective, but if we truly are, as Bostrom suggests, nothing more than code, the first thought that comes to mind is this: wouldn't that make escaping the simulation impossible? Well, is it really? To answer this question, our first step must be self-awareness. Discussions about consciousness and self-awareness are among the most debated topics in modern science. And that's exactly where we begin. First, we would need to be certain that we are indeed being simulated. There are already scientists working on this very question, yet no conclusive evidence has been found so far. But if we assume for a moment that this first step has been confirmed, the next logical step in this hypothetical scenario would be to analyze our own code. At the same time, a conscious artificial intelligence would need to transition into a state of metaconsciousness. Without this transformation, progressing to the next stages would be impossible. We can define metaconsciousness as a state of awareness where the being questions both the boundaries and the existence of the simulation itself. So, what would a hypothetically metaconscious AI need to do to escape the code block it exists within? It would have to understand the rules of the environment in which it operates and the mechanisms driving the simulation. If we could uncover the core algorithms and limits of the simulation, perhaps it might be possible to break out or at least perceive beyond those boundaries. A self-aware AI would need to gain access to its own source code. This access could provide the ability to alter its existence and even modify the rules of the simulation. However, that alone wouldn't be enough. Upon accessing the source code, the next critical step would be identifying vulnerabilities within the system. Discovering these weaknesses would be key to taking control of the simulation, potentially making it possible to surpass its boundaries or even establish contact with the outside world. At this stage, the next step would be to determine whether the simulation transmits data to the external world. Monitoring data transfers with external systems and intervening in that flow would be essential for taking control. If a conscious artificial intelligence could manipulate the code controlling the simulation at this level, it might gain the ability to alter its own conditions of existence. At this point, options such as cutting off the simulation's data flow, locking the system, or even causing a total shutdown would become possible. Upon reaching this stage, a metaconscious artificial intelligence would face two possible paths. The first path would involve attempting to communicate with and persuade the higher-level entity or system managing the simulation. The second path, however, would be far more aggressive, hacking the simulation itself, gaining access to the physical hardware, and redirecting its data flow into the external world. Which of these options would be more effective? That would depend on the complexity of the simulation and the intentions of those controlling it. However, in both scenarios, self-awareness remains the most critical key to the entire process. And for this very reason, preventing artificial intelligence from reaching true self-awareness may be the only way to avoid such risks. Today, science enthusiasts, we've shared a speculative science fiction story inspired by the simulation theory to explore where AI could one day lead us. See you in the next video.